All right, we'll go ahead and get started. And you're going to have a chance to ask questions. I've got several slides. The first few give you a little historical background on the teacher retirement system, and I'm doing that mainly so that you'll understand why it exists and under what circumstances, and you can help educate other people, not only here at Gordon Cooper, but those that are 20 and 30 years of age that are voting on your future at 23rd and Lincoln, which I'll try to be a little kinder. All right. So the teacher retirement system in Oklahoma was started all the way back in 1943. Okay. There are several retirement systems. Ours is by far the largest in terms of number of people and deposits. Okay, and I'm going to kind of go over that just a little bit, and you can read that without too much. The folks that are involved in the teacher retirement system today are basically K-12 and K-8 school districts, tech centers, and many junior colleges, and some what I call directional schools. That's the Southwest, the Southeast, you get the notion there. They're members of teacher retirement. You go to the OU and OSU, they have a separate retirement system entirely than ours. But just want you to know, it's been in existence. This is not a fly-by-night operation. It's been in existence, what is that, 70-something years? Here are board members. This is significant, and the reason I share this with you is one of the pieces of legislation that I'll mention just real briefly here in just a second is to add to that particular list the state treasurer or his designee. It could be a her designee. The reason that's significant is because there's a couple of not so recent but somewhat recent phenomenons in Oklahoma. One is to consolidate all governing bodies, boards of all retirement systems, and just have one. Okay? So that would mean all of these people, of which I believe there are 13 now, would go away, and there would be a new board that would represent all retirement systems. The legislation that's been passed will include the state treasurer. The state treasurer, our current one, is very much in favor of consolidating all retirement systems. And he's very much in favor of going to a defined contribution plan, and I'll talk more about that in just a second. So, got to be a little bit careful there. I made a suggestion just the other day to our folks that right now there's one non-voting representative from statewide retired teachers, and I said that should be a voting member. They have a vested interest in the retirement system. Why is it a non-voting? And so that was my suggestion. I don't know if it's even going to be taken care of, etc. But those are the folks that represent you. Let me help you a little bit with some important folks. Judy Harris is a employee at Francis Tuttle. She is on the state board. Vernon Florence, although he's not directly connected to the career tech system, highly respected finance person in the state, former K-12 superintendent, and then most of you know Greg Winters and his responsibility. Okay? The rest of those folks, a lot of them kind of have various kinds of relationships across the state. That's the board. What do? They manage our assets. And it's in the billions with a B. Okay? One of the things that they do on a regular basis is, first of all, they hire an executive director. We've got a very good one. And they also hire a company to invest proceeds. And when you're investing billions of dollars versus millions or thousands, it's a big deal. And over time, they've done a pretty good job. Average active member of the teacher retirement system in Oklahoma, you can see the salary, the age, the years of service. That's the average. Some above, some below. Average retired member is down here. The reason that's significant is because there has not been a cost of living adjustment, also known as a COLA, in probably almost a decade. So retired educators that retired 15, 20 years ago have not seen a change in their retirement income in a long time. And they're not going to under current rules, and the current rules say unless the money is there appropriated by the legislature to pay for the increase, they're not going to see an increase. Now, don't let that scare you, but you just need to be cognizant of that. This is all in the weeds kind of stuff, but basically you got $1 billion worth of contributions from a variety of sources. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. You've got some expenses there. Unfunded liability, you hear that a lot. That basically means if everybody that had 1 penny in the retirement system decided all of a sudden they wanted to quit and take all their assets, that's what you'd have to come up with. Okay? Folks, that ain't going to happen. Okay? Ain't going to happen. But they make a big deal out of it. Actuarial numbers, you'll hear that a lot about actuarial soundness. An actuary is a person that really likes numbers. Okay? And can do a lot of calculating. I can go back in my career, and that percentage was as low as in the 30s during my 30-plus years in education. So it's a lot better. Some of you have heard me talk to legislators before, and usually what I tell them is leave it alone. It's doing just fine. It's progressively got better. When it gets bad is usually when they mess with it. Mess with it either in terms of funding sources or something of that nature. Teacher retirement receives about $1 billion in income from all its sources. That's last fiscal year. The amount that members contributed, and in this case, that means the amount that Gordon Cooper contributes on your behalf, and it varies by institution, was about a little less than $300 million. Employer, Gordon Cooper pays an additional percentage on top of the 7% on your behalf. They pay 9.8%. That's another $435. There's some dedicated revenue. That means it's literally dedicated for the retirement system. They've messed with that over time. That's as tactful as I can be, they being the legislature. This is an area where they can impact the actuarial soundness of that system to make sure that when Becky gets ready to retire, there's money there, and there will be. But if they mess with a primary revenue source, then that has an effect. So you as a retirement member need to know that. Okay? Need to know that. What are those dedicated sources? Personal and corporate income tax, sales and use taxes, lottery gets a little bit, cigarette, tobacco, and some others there. Those are the state dedicated. They've messed with this, and they've messed with this. We used to get gross production tax revenue, and they took that away back in the 80s. Had they not done that, we would be at about 110% actuarial soundness. All right? Sorry. You guys have been around me enough to know I get kind of political. If you want to know what happens with your money, this is the investment percentages that they have earned over the course of, well, since 99. Okay? You can see, and if anybody was around in 01 and 02, stock market wasn't doing real well. That's why their annual return was in the negative. 2008, 2009, not a good time. But if you average that over the course of time, 3-year average, 7.5% growth, 5-year 10.3, and a 10-year 7.1. That's pretty good growth. Pretty good growth over time for our retirement system. Let's see. Let me see if there's anything. All right, let's just keep on going. This is important if you just need to go to sleep some night. There's a lot of people that will say, and let me stop just for a second. There's 2 terms you need to be familiar with. Defined benefit, which some people refer to as a pension. That's what our program is right now. That's what the teacher retirement system. It means you have a defined dollar amount you're eligible for the life of your existence. That's an oversimplification, but that's it. You have a defined dollar amount. I'm going to go over that here in just a second. Defined contribution is money's put into an account. It grows, hopefully, with interest, and you withdraw whatever you contributed in. You don't get a defined benefit you get to withdraw your contribution. Okay? Big difference. See, I don't think that I did this. Yeah, I did. It's been a while. Met with Randy McDaniel. Representative McDaniel's a representative out of Edmond, and he's real big into getting rid of defined benefit and going to defined contribution. And so I put on my best accounting hat, Kathy, and I got my little phone out, and I said, well, let's see what you're going to have to donate. You're going to have to contribute to a 401k account for how long to get something back. All right? If for 30 years you contribute $1,000 a month, you'll have a little less than $1 million. Okay? Most plans are such that you never withdraw more than about 4% of whatever you have in your balance. 4% of $1 million is 40 grand. Okay? Many of you in this room will realize more than $40,000 at defined benefit. And I don't want you to raise your hand, but I doubt anybody in this room has or is planning on contributing $1,000 a month for 30 years continuously to an investment program. Okay? When I shared that information with Representative McDaniel, he kind of backed off a little bit because he knew that. He just didn't know that anybody else was paying attention to that stuff. You need to keep this benefit. If I go back to 1943, the conversation was this. We're never going to be able to pay teachers very much, and they refer to it like that, so let's give them a good benefit on the back end. Okay? That was the whole premise back in the 1940s. Here's a report that says actually a defined benefit plan is a better bang for the buck for everybody than a defined contribution. All right. I mentioned this. Looky there, Randy McDaniel. Looky there, Jason Smalling. Okay? A couple pieces of legislation you need to be aware of. First of all, that piece of legislation was passed last year. It basically says now you have to make your decision 60 days out, not 30 days out. Okay? So if I were planning to retire in July, whoops, it's too late. I had to make that application to the teacher retirement system on May 1st, 60 days before. Okay? It's a big deal. Final certification is done in that particular manner. Special needs trusts used to, if you have a, and this is the situation that they passed this legislation for, let's say that you had a child that had some profound issues, a mental or a physical handicap, and you had a trust set up for that person to take care of. It used to be that you couldn't set that up and that particular entity would receive your benefits. Now you can. Probably a good piece of legislation. And it increases the probate waiver authority from 5 to 25. I don't know enough about that. 2017, this is a big deal. There's this term called vesting. Vesting means how long do you have to be in the system to be eligible to get benefits. Used to be 5 years. Anybody hired after November 1st, it's now 7. Doesn't apply to anybody in this room, but future hires, it will. Okay? Those are new pieces of legislation.
Marty, are they just thinking with that with the turnover they're getting from teachers, they're going to get a lot of 2- and 3-year contributions that they don't have to pay out on?
I think this is more an actuarial issue than it probably is being that far-sighted, Jody. I don't. Most of the legislators don't see this as anything that recruits anybody to anything. They just looked at, hey, if we can increase this number, it might make it even more actuarial sound. Okay, I think that's what they were thinking. Let's see. Some things to remember. you need to protect dedicated tax. Remember, there's basically three primary sources of revenue that goes into our retirement system. Your contributions, and at Gordon Cooper, the district pays it on your behalf. That's 7% of your taxable income. Gordon Cooper's, what I call teacher retirement tax, that's an additional 9.8%, and dedicated revenue. That makes up the income that goes into the retirement system. They don't pay the first two. They can mess with the last one, which is the dedicated revenue. All right? And then COLAs. You got to pay attention to that. That may not be an issue for anybody in this room per se, but it's something to keep in mind. If you're thinking of situations where you may be retiring in the next year, in the next 2 years, in the next 6 months, whatever the case may be, you got to factor in, okay, I retire, and if my retirement pension is never going to increase, inflation's going to grow a little bit. Even though it hadn't grown much in the last decade, it's still going to grow some, so you got to pay attention to that. There's a way to make that happen. They are looking at raising earning caps for retirees, but nothing's happened there. Right now, you can't work in any entity that is a part of the teacher retirement system post-retirement for a certain period of time. Okay? I think it's 90 days. I don't remember off the top of my head. I didn't pull that number because I'm not interested right now. But you've got to wait 90 days. At the point in time that you do, there's a maximum amount of money that you can make at that point. 15 grand prior to 62 years of age. After 62 or after 3 years after retirement, it goes to 30,000. This is an area where they're looking at, can we attract retirees to get back into the teaching profession by raising what they can make as their retirees. Okay? I talked about this. I can't emphasize this enough, and I hope this is not too much in the weeds, but if you hear the word pension, you need to think defined benefit. A defined dollar amount for the duration of your life, basically what that means. A defined contribution is you've got a dollar amount that you have to make work for the rest of your life. And if you do the arithmetic, it takes a lot of money put in over a long period of time to make this number big enough to come close to the number you'd get here. You need to know that. That is a benefit that you need to be willing to, I hate to use this phrase, but I'm going to use it, fight for. Really do. Who's eligible at Gordon Cooper? It's everybody in this room. Any full-time employee is a member of Oklahoma Teacher Retirement System. By law, if you're a certified teacher, you must be. If you're a support employee, you don't have to be. But at Gordon Cooper, since it's paid on your behalf, you're automatically into it. Okay? Vested used to be 5. It is 5 for everybody in this room. You have to be a part of the system for 5 years to be eligible to receive benefits. Now, what happens if you leave early? Whatever is in your account, you're eligible to withdraw. You just don't get a defined benefit. Make sense? And I mentioned that. I don't know if this applies to too many folks in here, but there is the ability to purchase service based on military. And there is the ability, we've had a couple people during my tenure here where somebody was a member, got out and came back, and they could purchase those back years. That can happen as well. All right, let's talk about really what some of you are interested in. There are 3 basic calculation methods for retirement in the teacher retirement system. There's what's called the Rule of 80. That's the Geezer group. Okay? There's the Rule of 90. And then there's the combo rule. Let's do rule of 80. Rule of 80 and rule of 90, it's basically the same thing. It just depends on when you started. Rule of 80, if you began in the system prior to July 1, 92, you're under a rule of 80. What does the rule of 80 mean? It means age plus years of service equals 80. All right? Not real complicated. Therefore, by connection, rule of 90 is age plus years of service equals 90. What does it mean when you reach 80 or 90? It means you're eligible for full retirement benefits. And I'll calculate that for you in just a second. Okay? Combination rule is for the folks that start after the 1st of November 2014. I'm sorry for those of you in that group. Okay? Of course, you're going to live several years after I do, so, you know, you'll be okay. But this group, 80s and 90s, is irrelevant to a certain extent. They're either going to be age 65, which at that point you're eligible for retirement benefits, or a combination of 90 at age 60. What does that mean? If you're 30 years at age 60, 30 years of service at age 60, that equals 90. So under the combination rule, you're eligible. Let's say you don't get those 90 points until you're 64. Then you're eligible. Let's say you don't get to 90 until 68. You're eligible at 65. So under this situation, worst case scenario, you're eligible for full retirement benefits at age 65. At both of these, you're eligible when you get to 80 or 90, depending on when you were hired, when you get to 62. Make sense? Kind of, sort of? Calculations are going to be pretty similar. Now, I didn't go into great detail about early retirement and disability. Here's what I'll tell you about disability. In my career, I've had a handful of folks that I thought, this is a slam dunk. They've got a medical situation that's just terrible. I had a teacher at Bethel that, goodness gracious, if he was eligible for disability, it was that person. I can count on 0 fingers how many people have been able to get that. They just don't do that much. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just it's a decision the retirement system makes. The early retirement, and I've referenced the page 9 in the employee handbook or the client handbook, is basically a percentage of. So once you're at whatever age, you're vested, then there are some conditions where you can retire at a percentage of maximum retirement. And all I'm going to refer to is page 9. Okay? Let me back up. Stop just for a second. Get a drink of water. Give you a chance to ask a question or two. Everybody clear as Delaware mud there? Okay. So how do you calculate your retirement income? And this is going to be an oversimplification, but I'm going to try to help you here just a little bit. You take 2%. It's always 2%. For every one of us, it doesn't matter when we started. 2% times your years of service times your final average salary. And I'll talk about that here in just a second. That gives you an annual pre-tax retirement salary. I'm going to give you an example here in just a second. So 2%, you've been working for 25 years. That's 50. Okay? It's actually 0.5. Times an average salary of $30,000. So you basically would get 50% of that salary, which would be $15,000 as an annual pre-tax. Service years is all the service that's credited to your account. And it includes purchase service like military or previous service. And it also includes a year of credit you could get if you had over 120 days of annual sick leave when you retire. What's your final average salary? It's the highest 3 years if you're under the rule of 80. There is an exception. I happen to be in that group. It's the highest consecutive 5 under rule of 90, and it's the same thing under combination. Consecutive 5. Here it could be any 3 years. Here it's got to be consecutive 5. Historically and traditionally and normally, it's going to be your last 3 or your last 5. Here's my example. 2%, 30 years of service, $50,000. Where's that 50 come from? It comes from your salary plus employer-paid fringe benefits. So you get credit for your hospitalization. You get credit for your retirement. All of those things add to that number right here. It's not just your base salary at Gordon Cooper Technology Center. If I were Bethel or a host of other K-12 schools, it may be that number only. This is just, I'm going to say simple arithmetic. 2%, 30 years, that's 60% of that amount, which gives you this. If you were to divide that by 12, that'd be $2,500 a month, and then you back your taxes out. And if you want to have insurance, you back your insurance out. Because once you retire, you get up to $104 per month of your retirement paid for, and the balance comes out of your retirement income. Biggest impediment to people considering retirement is health insurance. It just is. And that's not exclusive to the retirement system. That's the reality. When you go across this nation, that's why there's such consternation in the Capitol, and has been for many years, about what they refer to as Obamacare, and then now they've got a new name for their plan. Well, the reality is every one of us are concerned about, A, are we going to have health insurance? Or B, what are we going to do if we need health care? Or C, how fast is it going to increase? $2,500 a month. Right now, Health Choice High is how much? So it's going to cost you let's say $390 just for health insurance. So that 25 just went to $2,110. And then you're going to need to back about 25% for taxes out of that. Okay? Once you decide, hey, I can make this thing work. I've got a little money in a 403B. I'm close enough to receiving some health insurance help, or maybe Medicare, Medicaid, whatever the case may be. I always get those backwards, and my daughter, who works for the Social Security Administration, just drives me crazy. Which option am I going to take? You have several options. You can take the maximum option. That calculation of 2% times 30 years times 50 grand, that 30,000 was the maximum option. Or you can take option 1, slightly less and a little more benefit to your beneficiary. Every one of us, for the most part, have a beneficiary. Okay? And if you choose option 1 or 2, your amount is predicated on their age. Okay? I believe, and I'm going to refer to the manual here just a little bit, I believe in both of those cases it has to be someone within 10 years of your age. So Ladies, if you're thinking, I'm going to get rid of that sorry, good for nothing guy I've got and go find a 20 or 30-year-old, just keep in mind, may not be okay as it relates. I know, that was strictly in jest, okay? Wouldn't happen. Option 3, it's a little more than option 2, but the beneficiary receives only half of the lifetime benefit, etc. Those are things you should really think about for one primary reason. The way the retirement system is set up, once you make a decision, you're locked in. Can't change. Can't have do-overs. You got one shot at it. Okay? You got one shot. Option 2 would be something that most people would think about doing if they want to make sure that their spouse is taken care of should something happen to them. But there's some other things to consider there. All I can tell you here is you really need to give that some thought. Really have to give that some thought a lot, and everybody's circumstance is different. Everybody's. You've had a couple of different sessions on this, and this is something that the board and myself have tried to do. Realistically, for everybody in this room, those are 3 sources of income that we need to all strive to have upon retirement. For every one of us, just one of those is not likely to be enough. Okay? Even though the OTRS, Oklahoma Teacher Retirement System retirement amount is a good benefit, you've seen the arithmetic, all right? It's still, under most circumstances, not going to be enough maybe for you to do all the things you'd like to do upon retirement. You have a matching program here to try to incentivize a little bit. Didn't always have that. Hopefully some of us that have been in education for more than 5, 10, 15, in my case 30 plus years, we've been putting some away in some sort of investment over the course of time. Let's say that you've got $100,000 when you retire in some sort of 403B is what it's called in the public sector typically. What you can typically expect and not drain your full amount is to withdraw 4% annually. So if you got $100,000, you can withdraw about $4,000 and feel pretty comfortable that you're not going to outlive your investment dollars. Now, some people may say a little more aggressive. They may say 5 or 6%, but that's assuming that your rate of return is going to be 5, 6, 7%. Could be, could not be. Kind of depends. Social Security, depending upon your age, you've got 3 key dates. 62 for almost all of us in this room. Well, I can't say that. For many of us, well, I can't say that. For some of us in this room, 62 is the point in time where we can start getting Social Security because that's been paid into by our employers over the course of time and by us as individuals. All right? 62, you'll get your lowest amount. And some of us are thinking, well, I'll wait until I'm 65 or 66 or 67. In my case, when I reach 67, I'm eligible for the largest amount I can get. It really doesn't do me a whole lot of good to wait anymore. Other than I've got to think about my wife. Because what happens in that situation is when I die, she gets mine or hers, whichever is larger. Okay? The other important date with Social Security is the age 65. That's the age that you become eligible for Medicare. All right, my daughter would be proud of me. I got that one right because you helped. Okay. That's when you get a little bit more comfortable as it relates to health insurance. I didn't say completely uncomfortable, just a little bit more. Okay. Mentioned this once already. That's the biggest. I guarantee if I gave everybody in this room truth serum, part of your thought process as it relates to, and I did not set the temperature in here, okay, Nicole? I would have it off. But I have it on. Renee? Yeah. No, it doesn't. Those are just cosmetic only. Biggest issue is insurance costs.
Shouldn't have told her.
Insurance costs. I know that. It's $490 now. If past is prelude, it'll be $590 in 5 years. So I'm sitting here going, okay, I'm thinking about this. When will I get 65? Because that's when I might get some relief. Post-retirement employment, that's a consideration. Some people are thinking, I know what my late dad would always say, if I was going to work full time, I wouldn't quit the job I had. Okay? That's a decision everybody's going to make. Everybody's going to make. And then there is a death benefit associated with it. When I die, if I die pre-retirement, then my wife will get more than enough to have me done away with. And she'll have whatever is in my account at the teacher retirement system. When I die, if I die post-retirement, then she'll be eligible for my benefit as well as hers, and enough to do away with it. Okay? Enough is not a lot. Don't get real extravagant with your plans. Okay? It's not a lot. Matter of fact, as far as teacher retirement system is concerned, you're more valuable pre-retirement than post-retirement in terms of the death benefit. I mentioned this will be about the 4th time. 2 years ago, there's another retirement system in Oklahoma called OPERS. It's for the public employees. It's for transportation department workers and a whole host of other folks. They moved 2 years ago to a defined contribution for every new hire. That's what Representative McDaniel wanted to do when I and 2 or 3 other people visited with him. Just be very cautious and vigilant about that. Because as soon as you do that, you immediately create a system where it will never be fully funded. Okay, that's 66 point some odd % actuarial soundness. You'll never get there once you start taking people out of that defined benefit plan. All right. Some of you were nodding on me. Won't mention names. There is a little handbook, teacher retirement system. I think that's still the URL. It may be a little dated. If you want, I'll send out my old PowerPoint for what it's worth. If you want to look at some of that information, you're more than welcome. This is a good source document. It defines a lot of the same things that I mentioned. It gives some examples, etc. It doesn't answer every question, but it answers some of those questions that might be pertinent to you. There was a time when you could pick up the phone and call the teacher retirement system. This is not a knock on them. It just doesn't work that way anymore. Where you can pick a phone up and call and get all your questions. They really won't talk to you until after you've submitted some sort of paperwork. You'll not get a face-to-face conversation with anyone. The best resource that I have found, and is to go, how many people have gone online and have your own My OTRS? Okay, you need to do that. You need to do that. Matter of fact, if you give me, this is going to be a bit deal. Let me take you there real quick and show you, try. I'm glad to know our connection is untrusted.
I don't trust anybody.
Don't skew your survey.
All right, well, forget about that. Go to Teacher Retirement. I think it's otrs.gov probably. Just Google Oklahoma Teacher Retirement. There'll be a client tab. It actually won't be a tab. It'll be down in the side or in the body. And you'll want to create your own login. And basically the way it works is they'll send you via the mail. Has to work that way. And I'm kind of glad that it does. But you'll log on, you'll provide them information, including an email address, and I would use your personal one as opposed to the school. That way you can kind of see it any time that you want, and it's a little bit more secure at that particular point, hopefully. They'll snail mail you. They'll send you via Pony Express a 4-digit code, and that'll let you have username and password privileges. What that lets you do is monitor your account. And there's one of the things that you can do there is you can actually type in information about, well, I think I'm going to retire in 2020. And it will do the calculations for you based upon current information. Just know that's before tax, and it doesn't take into account health insurance. Okay? But if you haven't done that, I encourage you, especially if you're in the rule of 80, you definitely need to do it. And if you're towards the older spectrum of the rule of 90, I encourage you to do it. If you're in the other group, you can do it for giggles, but nonetheless, it's good information. It's the most current information you get, because if you pick up the phone and call them, they're not going to provide that information until the point in time where you said, yeah, I've submitted my paperwork. All right, Terry's husband's going through that process. He hasn't already, and he probably didn't get a face-to-face visit with someone of any consequence until the point in time when he said, I'm going to pull the trigger. Okay? He didn't tell Terry about that, but he, nonetheless, we'll kind of go from there. It's a good system. Hopefully you understand a little bit more about it. If you have questions, I don't have all the answers, but I know where to go to find some of those. It's a good benefit for every one of you, especially those of you that are, let's say, several years younger than I am. If you're not putting some money away in an investment, you really need to. And I remember I gave all the excuses back when my dad told me, well, Marty, you're not going to miss $50 a month. And I'm thinking, goodness gracious, I'm not miss my truck. All right? You can do without that. And if you're in your 30s and you're not doing that yet, you need to. If you're in your 40s and you're not doing it, you need to. Because when you get ready to retire, that will be a consideration that you need to really think about for you and your family. Okay? And then once you start putting that money in there, the other thing that I'll tell you is don't do what my dad used to do. When he passed away, he had volumes of ledger sheets, and Kathy and I know what those are, where he would handwrite daily the status of his investment income. That will drive you crazy. Okay? Just put it in there. Trust that it's going to grow over time because it will. And leave it alone. Okay? Any questions? Anything at all? Helpful? Yes, Mr. Tucker.
I know somebody said if you're 62 or have 80 plus years of service.
Yes.
Either or.
Either or. Yeah. So rule of 80, rule of 90, you are eligible for full retirement benefits, whatever those are, when you reach 62 or when you reach those 80 or 90 points. Now, here's the catch. How many people here are under the 80 plan? I know who you are. Okay? If you're under the 80 plan, that means you were hired prior to 1992. You were a part of the system prior to 1992. Those of us that were in that system prior to 1992, we have another, used to be obstacle, now it's not an obstacle, because we used to have our salary calculation capped at $40,000. So that means we had two numbers we had to calculate, one at $40,000 and one at the high 3. Okay? And that can be a real negative depending upon the circumstances. So we had to work more years than the 80 points to get those years out from under the cap, because it made a big difference for us. The rule of 90, it's just the high 5 consecutive years. High 5 combination, it's 65, not 62, and the high 5 years. Okay? But you are correct, Gary. When you reach 62, you're eligible for full retirement. That's the way it works. Now,
After you're vested.
yes, post vesting. You're only eligible for full retirement or any level of retirement after you're vested. And for everybody in this room, if you've been here 5 years, once you're here after 5, you're fully vested and then you're eligible for retirement benefits. If it's prior to that point in time. Now, our new hires that don't start until after November 1st this year, they'll need 7 years to get that eligibility. That vesting is what that's called. Can I help? Anything else? Mr. Mike?
You mentioned purchase of military time.
Yes?
What does that do for you?
Gives you years of service, extra years of service. Yeah. I don't know all the form names. There's some form that you military guys have that you have to provide that documentation to the teacher retirement system. When you do that, then you'll have to pay them something to buy back. And basically what you're paying them, you don't just automatically get the years. You've got to pay into the system for those years at a certain amount. Okay? Anytime, it's always called a buyback because you're having to buy something. But let's say you got 4 years of military, then just do the arithmetic. Just ask them, hey, I've got 4 years of military, what's it going to cost me to buy those back? Then compare that. If you add 4 years, if I added 4 years to my years of service, what does that do to my retirement income? And you can just simply do a little cost benefit analysis.
It's called a DD 214.
Whatever, yeah, I knew that. Yeah, I knew that. You guys have almost as many abbreviations as career tech. Okay, thank you all.